What's up, guys? So here's a question I get asked all the time about teching a truck like this to race Ultra4. So right here I have my tech sheet, so I'm going to go over it with y'all and show you how to pass tech. First thing on here is your fire suit, your helmet, your neck restraint, your gloves. You got to have all of those things. The shoes, you got to have all those things, and they got to be within date and all that. There's a lot of details on that, so don't be afraid to get on the site and do a little bit of reading. And then next we got the seat belts. Condition, obviously they can't be tore. The date has to be good. All legitimate racing belts will have a date on them. I have seen belts that don't have a date on them, so they're not SFI certified, so you cannot use those to race with. Next is going to be the mounting. Okay, so it's got to be mounted to the cage. So this is the cage here, mounted to the cage. Center bar is mounted to the tube up here. You go through the cab, through the seat, you go through the cab, mount to the cage back here. You also got to make sure they're not going to rub on anything. Okay, so the next thing we got on here is your headrest. So you got to make sure this is where the back of your helmet is going to hit. That's basically all it is. It's got to be like 6 inches in diameter, I believe, so you couldn't just have a seat with it just chopped off. The next thing is your fire extinguishers. You've got to have at least a 2.5 pound fire extinguisher inside. I have mine mounted right there, so either me or the co-driver could get to it very quickly. Outside, you have to have 5 pounds worth of fire extinguishers. So you can have a single 5 pound or 2.5s. So I think this is a 3.5 and that's a 2.5. So I got a little over 5 pounds. I wanted one on each side. If you flopped on the side, got in the mud, something weird, you'd be able to get to one. So the breakdown storage device or signage device. It's this little foldable triangle, and most people think that's kind of a crazy thing to carry with you, but there's been plenty of times where I've come around a corner and that's sitting there and it's slowed me down from hitting somebody. So that's actually very important to have with you. You must have 2 of those. You got to have a first aid kit. I have a first aid kit in my ammo box back here. You got to have your numbers, so it's got to be viewable from both sides. So this is double-sided. You can see it from anywhere, and mud cannot get on that unless you're upside down. You got to have your numbers on the viewable from side to side. You got to have your numbers on the back, which I have a number plate that screws on right there. I lost it somewhere in the last race. And then you also have to have it on the front. So luckily my hood curves down and you can see that perfectly. That's just a sticker. I had all those stickers made for like less than 20 bucks. The next thing is your lights. There's amber, tail, and brake. And when it says amber, that's rear light. So I have this chase bar. When you turn it on, it has an amber light right there that lights up and stays on. It has the flashers and all that. That is not necessary, but it is nice to have. It has a tail light, so it has red lights on all the time when it's on, and then it has a red light when you hit the brakes. The horn, I ran the factory horn for a long time, but I actually got this siren here off Amazon. It was like 40 bucks. It was super loud. People actually couldn't hear the factory horn while I was driving, so you definitely want people to be able to hear you. The spark arrestor, that's basically a muffler. So if you have a muffler, you're good to go. They just don't want you to run straight pipes. Mirrors, I chose not to put mirrors on the outside, basically because I run it up against a tree constantly. I put this nice round, it's like a golf cart mirror. It's great. I can see everything out of it. You can get them at O'Reilly's for nothing. You do have to have at least, I think, 6 square inches of mirror. Don't quote me on that, but the more mirror you got, it can't hurt. So you got to have reflective tape on the rear of the car. That is this, it's like trailer tape. You got to have so much square feet of it. So I have the piece here and then the 2 red strips there. You can actually see that when you're coming up on somebody. Super great. The next thing is fluid containment. So basically you gotta have the whole vehicle set up to where if it does roll over, it can't spill, the diffs can't spill, the transmission, transfer case, engine, fuel, nothing can spill on the ground. So you got to have some kind of catch can or hoses routed to where that will not happen. The fuel system, the baffling, so that's a good one. You got to have a fuel tank with a baffle in it. So that means it must be a tank in a tank, kind of. So this is a metal box with a plastic tank inside. You can have a metal box with a rubber tank inside, but there's basically got to be 2 layers of tank. So if that gets jabbed, it won't spill or something like that. You have less chance of that getting busted. If that big tank got busted, that could be pretty scary. So you don't want that. Rollover valves. So you got to have the rollover valve, and they also check for the vent of the rollover valve. So that has to run all the way around. It's supposed to run up and over the occupants all the way around and then back down. So mine runs up this tube here. You can see this clear hose up, around, it goes all the way down under the bed, comes all the way out and dumps right here at the back. So there's no way in a rollover we could ever get gas spilt on us unless the hose broke. So you obviously don't want to put it somewhere where it could get pinched. Okay, so the next thing we got on here is a splash guard. So since it's basically a guard to where you don't hit the fuel tank from underneath, so it's in the bed, so that counts as a splash guard. The bladder, I talked about the bladder, locking dipstick. So you got to have some sort of mechanism to keep your dipsticks from coming out. On this truck, there's only one, since there is, it's just an engine and the transmission doesn't have. I just made this little bracket here, and it's got a little clip that goes through and holds the dipstick in. Super simple. You could just zip tie it down. And also the same with your transmission. Most transmissions have locking dipsticks, but next thing is your kill switch. So this is pretty important in my mind. Mine is right here in the center of the dash. Me and the driver, or me and the co-driver can reach it. It's supposed to be labeled on and off. I wrote that on the dash with a paint pen. Up is on, down is off. It needs to be easily accessible when you're strapped in. You got to think about when you're strapped in and upside down whether or not you can reach it. The battery mounting is next. My battery's in the bed. It's just got a nice little, it's just a cheap battery with a nice little mount on it. It's mounted all the way around, bolted to the bed. So basically they don't want your battery bouncing around and arcing out. Hydraulic line routing. So on this truck, I don't have any sort of hydraulic assist or nothing. So the only hydraulic line I have is the one line from the pump to the steering box. So basically what they're talking about in this is for cars with full hydraulic or something like that, where your orbital valve would be up in here, and they don't want that to ever be able to spray fluid on you, because under high pressure, flame, anything like that, that could be a bad deal. So you got to have your hydraulic lines to where they cannot spray on you. So if you do have some kind of assist, you can't route the lines inside the cab or up against the exhaust. They're going to look to see if it's going to get rubbed. The next is a scatter shield, which is basically your transmission tunnel and your drive shaft. So this is basically factory, so that passes. They want that to be a certain thickness in race cars. Same with the firewall. If you're running something stock, it's got a firewall. They just don't want any holes in it. The floorboards, in this truck, the floorboards were actually a little rusted, so I put another layer of sheet metal on them to help out with that. There was a few little rust holes in it, super common for these old trucks. So next thing we got is the roof. So in a bigger car, you would have to have an 1/8 inch thick aluminum, or I think it's 1/8 inch thick steel. In stock class, the factory roof counts as your roof. So you don't have to have anything extra over your head in stock class. As long as this isn't damaged, you're gonna be just fine. Helmet clearance. Obviously they don't want your helmet hitting the cage or the roof or anything like that. So sometimes you gotta adjust your seats around so you sit nice and low. The bumpers. So it's got to stick out to where if you run into somebody in the back, it's very common to happen, and that way you do not go tire to tire. And they also want the ends of these capped without open tubes, so I guess so you don't hang up. That really doesn't make sense to me, but that's what you want. You don't want to hit anybody, and you got to have a rear bumper as well. Make it so someone can hit it, because it will happen. You know, I've got bumped here, and yeah, you're gonna get bumped. So make sure you have good sturdy bumpers on the front and the back. Okay, and the doors. So if you're in stock class, your doors have to open. If you're in another class, it gets a little bit different, but you gotta have some secondary latches. So I have the factory latch here. The secondary latch is just these. It's little slide locks from Lowe's. They're $2 a piece. They slide over. So if I try to open with the door handle, that catches it. There's times when you hit stuff and bend a door and you need it to stay shut. You don't want your door flopping. So window nets. The window nets, I do not believe they have to be date certified. I don't believe they actually go out of date. But basically what they look for in this is that you can get them down. So mine come down right here. They make sure they're nice and tight. They make sure when you're strapped in that your hands can't come out of the car. So if you have square window nets and your hands can reach out in a rollover, they're going to want you to have better window nets. So basically that's all that is. The next is vehicle weight and tubing size. I believe it's like 4450 is when you got to have, and over you got to have 2-inch tubing for your cage. This is all 1 3/4 cage. So if you think your car is going to be over that weight, you might double check my numbers on Ultra4's website and make sure that's correct. But if it's going to be so heavy, you got to have some thicker cage tubing. Weld quality and general construction and dented tubes. So basically, I've seen some pretty bad welds on some cages, but you know, as long as it's sturdy, if it's ugly and strong, that's fine. But you know, general construction, they're gonna look and make sure it's gusseted all around. You know, this is down attached to the frame, gusseted to the frame, everywhere. They're gonna check all that and make sure you're not gonna get hurt out there. Next thing is gussets A and B pillar. So you gotta have gussets here and here. I basically gusseted it everywhere. I'm gonna drive it hard and I want it to be safe. You can see my plate gussets, they kind of go into the cab up here on the corner. They're just gussets right there, you know, nothing fancy, just they do have to be 3x3, so you do need that. Next we got general construction. So obviously, like I said, if it's ugly and strong, that's fine. If it's not, doesn't have good triangulation in some of the cage and looks scary, you know, they're gonna ask you to fix it. Low range capability. You got to be able to put it in four low, or at least have a four low range. So you got to have more than a 1-to-1. So you could not have 4 high, but you know, obviously in this truck I have all the 4 lows you could ever imagine. So that's it. But yep, so that's all it really is. So this is your tech sheet. So if you were to go to a race, this is your safety tech. So they have another tech whenever you do the stock rules. So if you did 46, 48, 45, 4400, obviously there's not much to check on the cars in 4400, but in this they usually have a class rep look at the truck and make sure everything's up to the class rules. That's not as important as this, I believe. So as long as you have all of this and you have all of your class rules, you're going to be good to race. This stuff really isn't that hard to get done. There's some few things in there that you have to have, but it's all for safety. So basically that's all you got to do to get one of these trucks ready to be able to race in a stock class.